Cavs are on fire. Let's talk about it. But before I do, I want to give a huge thanks to today's sponsor, DraftKings. Hey, Hoop fans, it's that time of the year. The NBA season is in full swing, from buzzer beaters to jaw-dropping dunks. The season is on fire. I partnered up with DraftKings to get you right in on the action. Discover the excitement of real-time betting by downloading the DraftKings app now. New customers get a no-sweat bet. Get a bonus bet back up to $1,000 in the amount of your original bet if it doesn't hit. Minimum deposit of $5. Sign up using my promo code CavsBurner. That's right. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your bet loses. And DraftKings has got something for the existing customers as well. All customers get same game parlay insurance every day. Get a bonus bet back if one leg of your same game parlay loses. What's up, everybody, and welcome to Bleacher Report. I'm here to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. And this Cavs team this year, it just feels different. There's a lot of different reasons why this is the case, but it just feels different. Now, I don't think this means different as in they're going to make the leap and, get to the NBA Finals this year. I think that is kind of stretching what I'm saying. But I do think that the playoff story is going to be a lot more respectable for this team than it was at least last year, right? Like last year, they got to the playoffs. It was a huge disappointment. We've been kind of reeling from that since. But I think this is going to be a different story. I think there's a bunch of different reasons on why that's going to be a different story. And I think that the way I'm going to communicate why I feel that way is by talking about every player on the Cavs team that I think matters in the rotation and kind of grading them out, and also talking about some other things that surround the team or some speculation that surrounds the team in general. So when it comes to this team feeling different, I think it really comes down to a number of things. 3 points, they're shooting more, they're making a good amount. Deeper, they're just a deeper team. They have better players on the bench. Their bench scoring is not a disaster like it was at some points last year. Then you have a tougher team. I think this team responds a little bit better to the physical challenge than they did last year. We see them have a couple close calls, a couple fights almost like that about this Cavs team. And I think that what they're doing now holds up better in the playoffs than what they were doing previously, because they're just a bit more difficult to defend. Now, let's go and grade this whole roster. All right, so when we look at the Cavs roster, let's look at some overall numbers for this team. They have a overall SRS of 4.97. Last year, they finished first out of all NBA teams in that statistic. This year, they're fifth. When it comes to pace, they are up significantly from last year. Last year, they were they had the slowest pace in the NBA. This year, they're 21st out of 30 teams. Offensive rating is slightly down. Defensive rating is up. The net rating is up. Expected win-loss, all of that stuff is fine there, right? It's right there on their basketball reference page. When it comes to players, let's start with Donovan Mitchell, or at least giving a grade to Donovan Mitchell, who I think has been spectacular. This is one, I said this last year, right? And I think I'll have to say it again. His years in Cleveland, these last 2 years, have been the best 2 years of Donovan Mitchell's career. Point blank, period. He's averaging more points. more consistently. He's finishing like he should finish in the top 10, well, top 6 of MVP voting, just like last year. Honestly, he should be in serious consideration for MVP voting. The way that he stepped up for his team, and the way that he stepped up for himself in these moments. And I think that he's being underlooked or overlooked in those categories. But he's going to finish this year probably in MVP voting range. He's going to be NBA all second or first team. He's going to be he's going to be well awarded All-Star. Obviously, he's already made that. And another year where he's averaging 28 points on pretty good efficiency, on pretty good shooting splits, on pretty good everything, right? Like the 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, and field goal percentage are all fine. He has had a little bit of a dip in his field goal percentage, but Donovan Mitchell was somebody who people were concerned about his ability to age as a player is another thing, right? When he burst onto the scene, he was a little bit older than most draft prospects. I believe he was a year older, right? I think he spent 2 years at Louisville. Came out at 21. And people felt like he had an advantage because of the age thing, but came out averaging 20. He got to about a 24-point per game scorer in Utah. And now in Cleveland, he's a 28-point per game scorer. He's also a fringe MVP candidate both years, and I think that will continue the longer the season goes. I think where Donovan Mitchell has really made a leap here, and you can tell it statistically, is in his assist numbers, but his playmaking. He has done an excellent job facilitating and playmaking in the absence of Darius Garland. Like, he's really stepped up and been this team's everything. He's averaging 6.3 assists, which is his most in his career, averaging 2 steals. I feel like he's been playing great defense on that side of the ball as well. Donovan Mitchell definitely having one of the standout seasons of his career. And it's something that we have to talk about, is that he is having his best basketball in Cleveland. Now, when we talk about Donovan Mitchell, there's other stuff that comes with the conversation of Donovan Mitchell. And that is his contract status or his status as a Cleveland Cavalier going forward. I think this situation has been, how's the best way I can put this without being mean? I think that this situation has been talked about in only one way, and it's done the entire conversation about Donovan Mitchell a disservice. Because the conversation always starts, whenever it's being had locally or even nationally, it always starts with the assumption that Donovan Mitchell wants to leave Cleveland at any price, at any cost. That is what the assumption is. I don't believe that assumption to be true. Now, does Donovan Mitchell love the New York Knicks because he grew up a Knicks fan? Yes. Does Donovan Mitchell prefer to play for the New York Knicks? Sure, he might prefer to play for the New York Knicks. But I would prefer to make $35 million a year. I don't make $35 million a year. You see what I mean? Like, just because you prefer something doesn't mean that that's always what makes sense to you, right? Or even a more down home example is I almost always prefer Chick-fil-A, chicken sandwiches, right? When it comes to chicken sandwiches, I like Chick-fil-A's chicken sandwich. But sometimes it makes more sense for me to just go to Popeyes and get the Popeyes chicken sandwich because they're just closer, it's more convenient, it makes more sense, and maybe Chick-fil-A don't want me there for whatever reason, right? Like it's all those things kind of factor into what a player's decision is going to be. And when it comes to Donovan Mitchell, he might want to play for New York one day. but that doesn't mean he has to play for New York. He might want to play in a bigger market. It might be something that would be cool for him, but that doesn't mean he needs to play in a new market. I don't think we've done this conversation justice by talking about what he probably prioritizes. And what I think Donovan Mitchell prioritizes more than anything is the basketball situation. And this is where I feel like it's been low-key disrespectful how the Cavs get talked about. Because people talk about all these other situations as if the Cavs for Donovan Mitchell is not a proven, excellent situation for him. We just talked about it, right? And my guy Ray Rag says is right now, is there a better situation he could leave the Cavs for? There's not a better situation Donovan Mitchell could leave the Cavs for, in my opinion, because this is the best situation Donovan Mitchell has been in his entire career, and he's been the 1 seed before. He's averaging more points. He's more efficient. The talent fits around him better. There's a larger conversation to be had of, hey, if Donovan Mitchell's going to be your best player, who can be your number 2 scorer? What position and what skill set does that guy need? And is that necessarily Darius Garland or not? But when we look at this situation from a basketball perspective, can you tell me that there's another team in the NBA? It's a better fit for Donovan Mitchell? Like, you think he's going to fit well next to LeBron in LA, in Anthony Davis, where he's the third guy? And he's not going to be allowed to be as ball dominant. Like, we talk about him struggling to fit with Darius Garland, and that being one of the reasons that he might want to leave. But Darius Garland is not as ball dominant as LeBron James. He's going to get less opportunities to shoot than Anthony Davis. So why would he do that? If he goes to LA, he's not going to be the number 1 option. He's not going to be the number 2 option. That's going to be LeBron. That's going to be Anthony Davis. That doesn't make sense for him. People bring up the Brooklyn Nets. What? Why would he go there? They have nothing, especially if they have to trade for him. They have nothing. The New York Knicks don't want him. I've said this for a couple of years now. I've been saying this since the trade deadline last year, where people were like, oh, he's going to leave us for the Knicks. Are you sure about that? Do you think that the Knicks feel like Jalen Brunson and him are compatible back as a backcourt? I don't think they do. That's why they went out and traded RJ Barrett and got OG Anunoby and all these other pieces. I don't think that they feel that Donovan Mitchell is on their roadmap. It ain't in the cards for Donovan Mitchell and the Knicks to play with each other. So if that's the case, what are we doing here, right? It seems like people are so, like, I don't know why this is, right? But when people ignore the fact that the Cavs are the best basketball situation and just look for other teams for him to play on, it feels like they're thirsty for Tim to leave the Cavaliers. And sometimes the media does this very annoying thing that they tend to do when they know a team's being overlooked for silly reasons. They will put their hands in there like, oh man, the Cavs are being overlooked. It's a small market. Oh man, what can we do? As if they're not in control of what teams get talked about and what teams don't, right? How many times you heard the Cavs come up and people talked about how much they would like to talk about the Cavs more but they're not trying to get the Cavs on the producer's agenda, right? So it's one of those things that I find frustrating when people talk about the Cavs, or they're like, hey man, Donovan Mitchell needs to play for the Lakers so we can talk about him more. You can talk about Donovan Mitchell while he's playing for the Cavs. But people act like unless he's on the Knicks, on the Lakers, on the Celtics, you can't talk about Donovan Mitchell. There's no rule telling you, Dan Gilbert is not telling you you are not allowed to talk about Donovan Mitchell. So I don't understand why that's a reason that they don't do it. It's just a poor excuse, and honestly, it's one of my pet peeves when I see it being done. So Donovan Mitchell, obviously he gets an A. I think he's been excellent this season. Spent a lot of time talking about him, but he's clearly the team's best player. Let's get to other parts of the roster. So Donovan Mitchell, excellent job, career year for him. Darius Garland, not a career year for Darius Garland. Now, is it as bad as people are making it out to be? No. I think people are kind of making a big deal out of something that's happening for obvious reasons, right? So Darius Garland, he's struggling. He just had a game-winning shot against Chicago, so he's getting better as every day goes on. But he's been struggling on his way back, right? He scored 13 in his return, 14 against Brooklyn, 11 against Toronto, 21 in a loss to Philly, and then 12 last night. The field goal percentages have been all over the place for him, right? 33% versus Washington, 60% from the field versus Brooklyn. Then you got 36% versus Toronto, 56% versus Philly, and then 40% last night. Thought the Sixers would want to add him next year. Only 2 players currently under contract. I don't know if the Sixers are a great situation for Donovan Mitchell because I'm not sure the Sixers are going to keep Joel Embiid, right? That's another thing to consider. Like, the Sixers are probably going to be losing guys. How many times is Joel going to get bounced in the second round and think that, like, the Philadelphia 76ers have the answer? I think he's real close to just demanding a trade or getting out of there one way or the other. So we'll see what happens with Joel over there. But I see frustration brewing. So, yeah, Darius has been struggling from shooting. Assist-wise, he's been fine. He's been struggling with his return a little bit, shooting the basketball. Look, we know Darius Garland is a good player. We've seen Darius Garland play good basketball for like 3 years in a row, right? He averaged 21.7 the year he got to the All-Star game, and he averaged 21.6 last year. We know Darius Garland's good at basketball. We know that Darius Garland, despite the fact that the Cavs, despite the fact that it's not normally a great idea, can play with another guard that's ball dominant. He's done it his whole career, right? We know these things about Darius. I don't know why we act like we forgot him. Darius Garland's going to be fine, man. Like, Darius Garland, he's struggling now. I promise you, we'll get back from this All-Star break. It'll be, mid-March, and his numbers are looking pretty damn close to what they've been. And if you look at his numbers in March, they'll probably be identical to what he's been averaging the last couple of years. It's a bubblegum card theory for those of you who watch baseball a lot. Bubblegum card theory is basically a player's going to get back to their averages. So if they're slumping, you don't need to worry too much because the slump just means that they're eventually going to have a run or a hot streak to balance it out. Darius Garland's a little bit on the slump right now, but his shooting will bounce back. He will have some great months of shooting, and then he'll kind of even out at what he's always been. And I think that's a more than fair assessment, right? And hell, his shooting from the field this year has been better than previous years. He's at 47 right now. He was at 46 last year. But just recently, after coming back from injury, it's been a little bit more up and down than you would want. But I think he'll be fine. All right. Now let's talk about the future of Darius Garland with this team, similar to the future of the team with Donovan Mitchell in there. This is a little bit more complex because, one, the future of Darius Garland, you have to ask yourself, do they see Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland being the backcourt of a championship team? Now, I don't think this can't happen, right? I don't think it's impossible for it to happen. But what needs to happen in order for this to go down doesn't feel the most likely, right? If you want to see this Cavs team win a championship, which, look, we know this team's younger. They got years. Look how long it took the Denver Nuggets and that core to get it together and win a championship. I feel like we do this thing with basketball And honestly, in sports in general, where we make everything championship or bust every year. And that's just not the case, man. Teams grow, teams get better, teams learn from failures, teams improve. And this Cavs team had a failure last year in the playoffs, but I think they'll learn from it. I think they'll improve from it. But that being said, in order for this team to eventually get to a championship, with two small guards in the backcourt. And look, Darius Garland is a small guard. I don't know if I think that Donovan Mitchell is a small guard. He doesn't play small. He has a good wingspan. He can be a really good defender. But until he does some of that stuff in the playoffs, you kind of have to look at it as if he's a small guard. So you got guys who are two small guards. We know what Dame and CJ topped out as, right? Western Conference Finals, and they couldn't even get more than 2 games on a KD-less Warriors team. So it doesn't feel great about the ceiling of this team as currently constructed. You would feel great if this team's roster template was more similar to templates you've seen win a ton before that don't have Steph Curry. Right? Like if this team if Darius Garland were 6'8" and played small forward, we would feel much better about this. If Darius Garland if Evan Mobley were a 21.8 per game scorer, you would feel much better about this team's ability to win a championship, right? They're going to need somebody with length to be able to score the basketball at will. Now, is that going to be Darius Garland? No, because Darius Garland doesn't have that length. But it could be Emoni Bates, which I want to talk about Emoni Bates for a little bit. Now, he's barely played for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but he has been playing for the Canton Charge, and he's been playing good basketball for the Canton Charge. Now, Emoni Bates has the length. He's 6'10". He can shoot, he can dribble, he has the skill set to be able to score at will. The issue with Emoni Bates and why he can't get playing time right now is he has a ball-dominant style. He needs the basketball in order to score, but he's not a player that's going to command the basketball on the 2 seed in the East, right? He's not going to do that right now. Also, he's a bit thinner. You want him to get thicker. You want him to get about 200 pounds at that 6'8", 6'10" frame, however tall he is. But he could be somebody who fits into this picture. I look at Emoni Bates. Like, if you look at this Cavs team, like the Denver Nuggets, I look at Emoni Bates as the Cavs version of Michael Porter. Like, he's the piece that can start to put this thing into overdrive if it gets right? You have your scorers right now, Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. You have who you hope to be the best player in Evan Mobley in 2 years. You have these things, but you're waiting on it. And right now you're in that awkward period where you're waiting on it. So I think Darius, you'll give him a C+ for now. He's been fighting a lot of injuries. All of that matters. But I feel like Darius is going to end the season much stronger than he started it. Evan Mobley, who's came back and really had some strong performances from his comeback. Now he's putting up 22 against Washington, 14 against Brooklyn, Toronto, 17, Philly, 14, Chicago, 14. He's also been shooting the ball from the 3 a lot better this year. Well, since coming back, he has shot 1, 2, 6, 8, 9 threes. He's made 5 of them, so he's shooting over 50% from 3. He's had a couple of games where he's went 2 of 2, a game where he went 1 of 4 from 3. But yeah, like if he can add that 3-point shot, like the thing that Evan Mobley's missing that I feel like a lot of people are on his case about is the ability to score at will. He's not there yet. I don't know if he ever gets there. He definitely has the athletic ability, the offensive instincts to get there. But one of the things I see continuing to hold him back is he just can't hold on to the basketball to save his life, like at times. But that being said, like he's shooting his best 3-point percentage. And if he can be a 3-point shooter, I think that will open up his at-will scoring. Rebounding wise, he's been a better rebounder this year at 10 versus his previous average of about 8.5. Points per game, he's at 16. He's obviously one of the best defenders in the NBA. So Evan, I think Evan has been pretty good this year, 58% from the field. You want to see more from him, right? Because he's plateauing at about 15 points a game. You really want to see Evan Mobley eventually become an at-will scorer, right? You want to see him have, I don't know if you want to call it a bag, right? Because I don't think he's ever going to size you up and like do all, like that's not what you want Evan Mobley to do. But he does need some go-to offensive moves. He needs like 3 of them that he feels like he can go to in a big moment to get some buckets, right? That's what you want to see from Evan Mobley. If you get that out of Evan Mobley with what you're already getting out of Garland and Mitchell, then you have a team that can really make some noise in the East. So he needs to add that. I think he will, but right now I'll give Evan Mobley a B grade. Jared Allen, I think he's been excellent relative to what your expectations of Jared Allen should be. I give him an A grade, to be honest with you. I think Jared Allen's been pretty damn good for this team this year. He has 15.6 points a game over his 12.4 average, 10 rebounds over his career average of 9, 3 assists over his 1.5 assist average. He's shooting better from the field. He's not shooting any threes. Who cares? He's even shooting better from free throw. His win shares are up. He is playing probably the second best basketball of his career, right? These numbers look very similar to the year that he made the All-Star team in 2021/2022. I think he's playing at a all-star level. And I think he's really stepped up. And honestly, I think he's been better than he has been in his all-star year because he's shooting better from the field. He's shooting better from free throws. And I think he's facilitating the ball better. And I think that has a lot to do with just having Evan Mobley there. But I think he's doing a great job facilitating the basketball, great job keeping the ball moving. And even at times getting a little physical. And that's what you want to see out of Jared Allen, right? You know, you don't feel great about what happened with him and Mitchell Robinson last year. And that's left a bad taste in a lot of Cavs fans' mouths. But I think Jared Allen has done a good job here. Max Strus has been up and down. His 3-point shooting percentage is down about 3%. His free throw percentage, like his shooting percentages across the board are slightly down. He has moments where he's excellent. He has moments where he's not. He has a bigger role than he had in Miami. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Where I've been impressed with Max Strus has been as a defender. I think he's a much better defender than people gave him credit for when the Cavs made that signing. I like Max Strus. I think he's part of what adds that different element to this team. I know it sounds silly. I'm going to move on to the next guy. I know it sounds silly. But man, Georges Niang might be my favorite player on this team. Like I know. Georges Niang is not the best player on the team, obviously. But he's one of my favorite players on this team. His 3-point percentage is down from his career average of 39. He's shooting about 35, but he's also being asked to shoot a little bit more often. Total rebounds are up, assists are up. Field goal percentage is slightly down, half a percentage point. And he's averaging 9 points a game when he's averaged 7. I don't know what it is that I like about Georges, but I think he just brings an edge to this team that they didn't have before, a level of physicality. Obviously, he's a big body in there. I don't think they have his height and weight listed on Basketball Reference, but if I were to guess, he's 6'9", 6'10", 228. Like, that's what he feels like. He sits at, let's see if ESPN has him. They have him at 6'8", 230. So, yeah, somewhere around there. I think he's a little bit heavier than that. But, yeah, I think he brings a nice little physical element in there. You know, he has these moments where he kind of like low-key takes over a game. It's kind of hilarious. But, yeah, he he's out there. He's talking a lot of stuff. I think he adds an edge to this team. And I know it sounds silly if we're just keeping it to a fully basketball analysis here, but I think there's something to that. Like, I really do think there's something to the edge of the team not being as sharp last year, right? I think teams walked in playing the Cavaliers and just thinking they're soft. And when you think a team's soft, you are going to play them in a more disrespectful fashion than what you would a regular team, which would make you look better than you are. And I think the Cavs kind of gave the impression out that they were a friendly team. And I'm not saying they need to be the Jailblazers. I'm not saying they need to fight every week or anything like that. But they do need to have an edge to them. People need to know that you can't come around here and like try to punk us or do stuff like that. Like that there are consequences to those things. Speaking of it, Isaac Okoro, who I think has been pretty damn good this year as well. He's up in his field goal percentages, up in his three-point percentages, in every single one of his percentages except for free throws. He's up. I like that Isaac's not only shooting the ball better, especially from three-point. He's at 40% almost. He does need to shoot the ball a little bit more often, but Isaac's shooting has been less formulaic this year. When you look at his shooting history before, it was like he was only taking corner threes, right? This year, let's pull it up. Let's pull up the chart. But this is his shooting chart from last year, right? Yeah, this is last year's shooting chart. And it's like all corner threes or at the basket. And he's only shooting in these two areas. Now let's pull up the shooting chart from here, and it's a little bit more diverse, right? He's making more threes from the top of the key. He's even getting outside the corner a little bit, especially on that right side. And he is taking some mid-range jumpers and more two-pointers as well. So I think that's been something that Isaac has done a good job of, is just getting a better diversity of shot profile. I think Isaac has been a lockdown defender, obviously, and he's really livable on the floor. Like, I think, like, there were points last year where teams were refusing to defend him. That's not the case anymore. I think he's done a great job of making himself a very valuable part to this team. And look, when you have a team, and this is my only concern with Isaac, when you already have a team that's rolling out an undersized guard and an undersized point guard, it's hard to have a small forward on the team who's not an offensive threat and undersized. And Isaac has been a bit more of an offensive threat, and I think that's made him a lot more usable. And he's part of that identity that this team is trying to build this year, being a little bit tougher. Dean Wade, I think he's been really good defensively for this team. He's real important, right? Because the guys with length that can defend are critical given what this Cavs team's weakness is. So he serves a very specific purpose for this team. He's not going to score a ton of points. He's not going to take as many shots as you would want him to take. And he's going to have times where he just misses a bunch of shots in a row. But you're willing to accept that, right? Because he'll have games where he's hot, where he's making a bunch of threes. He'll have games where he's not. But what he is going to be a pretty good defender, right? His blocks plus minus, always pretty good. Dean's length is pretty important for you. I think they made the mistake last year in the playoffs of like playing him at the 4 and 5. But I think he's more of a, he's more of a 3, like, defensively. I don't think you want him to kind of anchor in the middle there. All right, Karis LeVert. I think Karis has been fine this year. I think he's been about what Karis has always been. Sam Merrill, another huge story for this Cavs team. He's shooting 44% from 3, and I don't think he's taking like a small amount of threes. Like, he took 7 threes against the Brooklyn Nets. But yeah, he's averaging 4 attempts. No, my bad. 5 attempts on 44% shooting, which is damn good. He's making about 8 points a game. Again, I think he's going to be real critical to this team. And I think That is one of the keys to this Cavs team and why this Cavs team is going to be a bit different. Um, why this Cavs team is different is there were times they didn't have options last year in the playoffs or when they played elite teams. They just didn't have options. If Donovan or Darius weren't going off, they didn't have a chance. You look at the one playoff game that the Cavs won last year. I believe Darius Garland went off, right? But if Darius or Donovan isn't going off, then the Cavs are in trouble last year. This year, it's a bit different. They have more options. When Mitchell Robinson is dominating you in the interior, you had no response to that. You had nobody you can plug in. Now the Cavs have a couple of guys that they could throw at him, right? Size-wise, hustle-wise. They have more physical options to throw at a Mitchell Robinson. Maybe even when Tristan Thompson gets back, that might be his use for a series for a couple of games. So you have that option available. Also, one of the things that was easy for teams to do was to basically freeze the Cavs out, right? We're not going to give you any open, well, we're going to give you a bunch of open standstill looks, but we're not going to let Donovan Mitchell create at the top of the key, and we're not going to let Darius Garland create at the top of the key, and we're not going to let you create off the top of that. Now the Cavs have shooters. They have better spacing. Much better spacing. I think that makes them a better playoff team. This is a team that's more suited to winning the playoffs than last year. We'll see what happens when it actually happens. But thank you guys for checking it out. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.